Welcome to the Live Your Possible podcast, the show about sparking and discovering endless possibilities where we work, live, and play. A safe place where we can help you peel back the cover to what may be blocking you from being your most authentic and happiest self.
I am thrilled to welcome Jeff Ma to the show today. He is the Director of Product Development at Culture Plus, co-creator of the Seneca suite of products and services, host of the Love as a Business Strategy podcast, and a Wall Street Journal bestselling author of the book, Love as a Business Strategy. Jeff and his team are hyper-focused on helping people find a workplace culture that allows them to be their whole selves. In fact, their best selves. Jeff is leading the development of various products and tools crafted with a culture of love at its center. Pushed by his own introspection, feedback from his colleagues, and a lot of uncomfortable practice, Jeff shifted headfirst into a new mission he shared with his team, bringing humanity back to the workplace. Listen into today's episode to hear what love means to Jeff and how he and his team got to this place by putting love to work as a business strategy in everything they do. Also, let's learn a more expansive view of growth mindsets from Jeff through unlearning and welcoming in new perspectives as part of our own evolution. Jeff also vulnerably shares a moment about his dad that initially shaped his view on life with an unforgiving slant and loss of trust. And then how he later used grace to fill his heart full again, leading to a light up moment that turned his life right side up with forgiveness and positivity. We also dive into topics like culture, leadership, beliefs, and vulnerability that you might enjoy. Yet remember, tune in not to change into someone else and listen for the learnings to help you reconnect as your best authentic self. Well, welcome, Jeff. I'm excited to have you on the show. I'm really interested to hear about your journey. I mean, it's pretty cool to see. You used to be in the gaming industry. You're now a best-selling author. You're a proud facilitator. You're doing so many cool things. And now it looks like you're bringing humanity back in the workplace, and you're doing this with love. And I even noticed that on your profile in LinkedIn, you talk about, hey, I love what I do. And I saw a post about your daughter having a little bit of a chuckle about how she perceives what you do. So I'd love to hear, and our audience would love to hear, what do you do that you love?
Oh, wow. What a big question. First of all, thank you for having me. And I think that, doing what we love is something that, like, from a very young age, we're like kind of ingrained to, like, you can grow up and you can be anything you want. And if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I've kind of outgrown that statement. I feel like I could love art. I could love drawing. I could love creating things with my hands. But what makes me love what I do is who I do that with and for, and what I do with that work, right? So I could spend every day of my life being paid to draw, but I could hate it because I could hate what's being done with it. I could hate the people who are asking for it. And I think we're taught to just do what you love, and we focus our craft, and then we lose sight of the importance of building the relationships around us and surrounding us with the right people and purpose, right? And so I love what I do because I get to go out and meet people such as yourself and others that are open-minded and want to learn. And we share kind of a vision and a purpose for the world. And that greater kind of purpose really, really gives me that drive and that passion. But on top of that, I get to just talk, and I love talking. So I'm kind of kidding, not really, but I love being able to share and being able to hear others, and just kind of this cross-pollination of perspectives is such a powerful thing. And being able to use that to get people to shift their minds and change their views of the world is such a satisfying thing for me. And so, yeah, thank you for having me on the show. So hopefully somebody hears this and gets something out of it. That's all I ever want, right?
Yeah, that's great. And I love how you say you get to do this. What an opportunity to share your passion and the work that you're doing, connecting this to love. And I think your daughter had mentioned about you getting to hang out with your friends.
Well, that's all she sees. She comes in while I'm on any call and just sees a grid of people's faces. We're just laughing and joking all the time. So she thinks that I get paid to do that. And I'm going to hate to break it to her the reality of it later in her life, but we'll let her keep thinking that for now.
Yeah, that's awesome. As you're connecting with your friends, it is true. Like sometimes my kids are like, "What do you do?" I'm looking at a screen. We're just connecting and smiling and laughing. And it's like you said, we're connecting with different people. And this is a great opportunity just to learn what folks are doing out in the world, how they're making an impact. And I find it interesting you're using the word love. Like, how did that come about for you? When did that start to enter into your ability of saying, you know what, we need to put love to work? I think that's a phrase I've read that you've quoted around the work you do. Like, you put love to work. Like, how did love be such a factor for you?
Yeah, I think when we first started down, and when I say we, I mean myself, the co-authors of our book, Love as a Business Strategy, but also the entire organization that I've gone through this journey with. I've been working at Softway now, also Culture Plus, for, a decade. And it's been an up and down journey. But, around 2015, 2016 is when the business took a sharp turn for the worse financially, and had to have a bit of a reckoning. And our CEO, Mohammed Anwar, he had a personal revelation around what it might look like to run a business and be successful in leadership in general. And it was around that time when we had to do some really bad layoffs. And not only were they bad for the morale, but the way in which we did it was also very inhumane, I'll say. It's very impersonal, very cold, calculated, sudden, and it left a very bad taste in everybody's mouth. And basically we were all kind of just waiting for the end. And Muhammad went, funny enough, to a football game, and he was there for the University of Houston Cougars, his alma mater. He's a huge fan. He just went really just to take his mind off of things, because there's just so much going on. He feels like he's not right for this job. He feels like he's reached the bottom. He'll still tell you to this day, this was the lowest point of his life. But he went to this game where his team was having a miraculous season, but now facing their toughest opponent, a ranked Memphis Tiger game, for their 10th win. And it was the fourth quarter, and his team was down 20 points. Wow. And everyone was just leaving because, ESPN said that at this point they had 0.1% chance of winning, something like that. It's hopeless. Everyone's filing out, trying to beat the traffic. And something inside of Muhammad told him to stay and just watch, just hang and support his team till the end. And that's still one of the greatest comebacks of Cougar football history. They won by 1 point with 30 seconds left on the clock, with a third string quarterback, all these other great storylines. But if you're not into sports, don't worry. The point of this story actually comes kind of after the game, when Muhammad tuned into the post-game, press conference. And this rookie coach, Tom Herman, at the time, rookie season, had turned this team around. And the reporter asked him, what was it that led to this win? How did your team not give up? How do they fight and come back? And it was what he said that changed Muhammad's life, and then kind of domino effect all of our lives and what we're doing now. He said it was love. And he used the word love. I don't know if Tom Herman knows the impact he had that day in that speech, but that word changed Muhammad's life forever, because he hadn't been using that word. He obviously hadn't been considering any of that. Our culture up to that point had been about as corporate as we could make it, intentionally, because that's the way the world works. But he said love, and it's not this, I love you, bro, love you, dog kind of love, but it's this, you have my heart in your hands, kind of hold you, support you, fight for each other, not for ourselves, but for one another type of love. And Muhammad had this moment where he was like, do I love my team? And he realized the answer was no. And he set about on this journey to rectify that and discover that, understand that more. And that's a journey that's now expanded and extended to myself. Of course, I joined him along the way. And since then, we've been championing this use of the word love, because when we say love, we don't mean, mushy rom-com, your hot best friend is your soulmate, and you don't find out until the end of the movie kind of love. We're talking about just real, almost like tough love. We're talking about how you would love someone you really care about, tell them what they need to hear when no one else will say it, and that type of relational love. And we find that to be the difference maker in everything. It turned our company around. It turned our careers around. It turned our purpose around. And as we've shared and spread this message, it's, what we're hearing is that it's the right, we're on the right track. And I think the world is slowly starting to see more and more of this. The word love is less and less. Like, if you said the word love in the workplace maybe a decade ago, I mean, you would have gotten kicked out of whatever room or meeting you were in. And today, people kind of perk up to it. They want to know more. They want to hear more. It's a little provocative. It's a little different, but it's also kind of welcome and it's kind of refreshing. So we've stuck with it. And, this is something we're very, very committed to.
Yeah, it's a powerful 4-letter word.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure. And I love the connection too regarding, the Houston Cougars comeback and just there was no chance of giving up. And there was the hope and the possibility there and the vulnerability, not only of the coach to share that to the media, yet to Muhammad to take that and to recognize himself, the courage to admit, hey, wait, am I loving this way? Am I being my best self? Am I being my authentic self? And that turnaround is really an amazing leader in action, willing to lead with love, serve with heart. We hear these phrases, right? Servant leadership, authentic leadership, caring for others. And I love that you're not only sharing this in your book and your podcast, this is the way you all are working in your different companies. And I think there's a few different groups that you work with. I'd love to hear how that came together, how that came about, because I think, as you mentioned, this helped to evolve your thinking and your offerings. I'd love to see from you and hear for the audience to hear, how did this come together and how is this being portrayed now in the marketplace? How is that coming? How does that fit with our audience?
It's wild, actually. When Muhammad went through his own personal transformation, he didn't actually ask anything of anybody else around him. He started just with himself. He started doing all these different things, like serving people, staying really, like if anyone was staying late, he would stay back and just be there and make sure they had something to eat and make sure they were, taken care of. And he would just quietly go about doing all these things that just try to show and demonstrate love. And it was very powerful. He never came and said, hey, I'm doing this, so you all need to do it too. He just started. And there came a point where the rest of the leadership team, myself included, we had no choice but to look at ourselves as well, because we're like, okay, well, Muhammad's doing all these things. What are we doing? And we realized that we were, he wasn't the only problem. He wasn't the end all be all kind of solution either. We had to get involved. And one of the things we did was we decided that we needed to revamp our leadership. We needed to address the toxicity that we were producing, our mindsets. And this wasn't like a collective all leaders. This is like a few leaders kind of leading the way, but also Muhammad helping spearhead this kind of effort. But we essentially decided to do this kind of retreat. And we're like, we're going to do a retreat. I'm going to put together some activities and some like mindset expanding curriculum, if you will, for ourselves, just to really address our leadership and our perspectives and our self-awareness, like this lack, like we didn't see our own flaws. And we had that wonderful kind of experience, really getting really raw, really vulnerable, really open. It was tough. And we left it feeling rejuvenated and kind of ready to, not like everything's great. It was actually the opposite. We felt like so much work had to be done, but in a great way. And that was this catalyst. We had no name for what we did. We just called it, a leadership retreat, but we took that and we started practicing it. And again, not everything fixed overnight, and people were on different journeys from that point, but we had this new understanding, this shared kind of agreement beyond that. And fast forward, and now we're turning the ship around. We're working with a very large customer we've been working with for years and years. They've known us this entire time, but they take notice. I'm talking about a Fortune 5 company that we work with. And this group of middle managers that we work with all the time, I mean, they take notice. They're like, they start telling us openly, hey, we love just having meetings with you guys. We don't even care what it's about. It's more fun. It's more productive. How do we do that? Like, how do we, like, my meetings aren't like that. And I want my meetings like that. I want my teams to work like that. And we kind of share with them what we'd done for ourselves. And they're like, oh, that's amazing. And a few months later, they come to us. Remember, we're a technology company at this time. I forgot that context. We're just purely technology, and some creative work, some stuff like that, but not culture. And they come to us and they say, we want you to pilot a program for our leaders. These are middle managers saying, we want to bring you in front of our leaders. And it's a very large organization, very conservative, right? Very risk adverse, but they're willing to kind of bring us in and say, we want you to do what you did for yourself for us. And we're like, very flattering, but no, like we have no experience doing that. We don't know where to start, but they insisted. They said, we've gone to the other companies, we've gone to the other, consultants, the large groups that do this, and we have all their mugs and their t-shirts, their swag, but we don't do anything differently. We want to try something different. We believe you can do it. And that started it all. I mean, we created what's called Seneca Leaders in that moment, in a 2-week period where none of us slept at all. We put it all together. We figured out what we wanted to do, the kind of how we wanted to lead it. We called it a radical experience for a modern leader. We made it a 2-day event that was meant to like remove them from wherever they are and get each individual leader to look at themselves differently and really have a major shift. So we didn't call it a training. We didn't call it a course. It was an experience. And it was the beginning of, everything. Because from there, it was a huge hit. We ended up then traveling the world and giving this to, 1,400 other leaders around the world, representing 50 plus countries. And the message never changed. Whether we went to Asia, South America, Europe, we used the word love. We said the exact same thing. Even when people told us not to, even when we said, hey, be careful with the word love over there. We said, thanks for the warning, but we're going to stick to what we know. And sure enough, humans all understand love. Humans all understand human things like that. But anyways, this is the birth of Seneca Leaders, which is today what we essentially still do. We've refined it. It's a 1-day experience now, but it's also, evolved and grown, and we learned along the way. But that's really the start of everything, because on top of all the products we do and all these other consulting and creative and marketing kinds of things that we can help with, our main thing is still Seneca Leaders. And it's proven, time and time again that people love this experience. And this experience helps really, really change people. And so it started as this thing of just working on ourselves, and through really a client empowering us, we actually stumbled upon our new calling. And that's where once we developed that and realized that more people want this and people keep asking for it, we kind of created Culture Plus around that. And we had our mission in place, to bring humanity back to the workplace.
Yeah, I love the shirt that says Culture Plus. That's really cool. For folks that are just listening, Jeff pointed that out. It's really fun. And I love the evolution. This comes from that word love again. And I agree with you. I used to think the word was squishy, something you couldn't share, until I had my own awakening and realized that, oh my God, I'm missing the love in the workplace. I'm missing being my best self, my authentic self, really caring for people like the way I should and can and want to. And actually taking that forward, how we evolve and how we transform as individuals, as leaders, as humans. And you're sharing this as a way that you all have transformed to something pretty amazing with how you're helping other cultures show that this is real. This isn't just a set of words. I think a lot of people look at certain words like joy or happiness at work or lead with love as maybe soft, or it's not tangible, or it doesn't lead to the outcomes I want as a leader. And what I'm hearing you say, and I've seen this directly myself, in fact, if they're missing, you're not going to get the results that you hope for. In fact, you're going to limit yourself, and people are going to limit their capabilities, and they're going to limit what they bring to work, limit their creativity. And you're showing what is possible. You're showing people how to be more open and creative, be more, I'd say, I guess, curious and even vulnerable. I think you've shared that word vulnerable a few times. And I think it's one of those core beliefs that I think you have and the teams have. And I'd love to know you personally, for you, Jeff, what are some of these beliefs that you've had that maybe it's from your gaming, maybe it's growing up in your childhood? How does this connect to where you are today?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because this journey started a while back, like I mentioned, but I think the world has changed so much since we started. We were talking about all these things before when they were these foreign, less accepted topics, but now you have, Brene Brown, and vulnerability is front and center. Psychological safety is like a known phrase, when before it was this, what are you talking about? Servant leadership, all these concepts. And I think we get really hung up on like buzzwords nowadays. It's very interesting if you look at what, every business wants to address culture now, and they want to make efforts and invest money and everything into fixing, building, or correcting whatever it is, their culture. But I think it's such an interesting space we currently are in, where there's this awareness of all these different terms. But I find, at least in my experience, that there's not always an actual understanding in what those terms are meant to be or represent. My favorite example is like psychological safety. Like everybody wants it. But I mean, the second you say the word psychological safety in a room, all of the psychological safety leaves that room.
Exactly.
Right. Like, and so many words are like that. Servant leadership is buzzword, where it's just like, oh, but like people get so focused on like, am I proving myself to be a servant leader, but not actually thinking about what the purpose of the heart of truly serving someone else looks like. And so there's this gray area that comes up when it comes to these terms. And that's why it's so challenging, I think, to talk and work culture with people. And the encouragement I always give people is just really start with self-awareness for yourself. Doesn't matter about what, doesn't matter. You don't have to focus on one specific area, but really starting to connect what you think you look like to others, what you think other people see you as, and connect the difference between that and what other people may actually see you as, or go confirm what other people actually see you as. And this is the journey that I think people don't take enough time to go explore. It's very easy to hear, okay, I need to practice vulnerability. I need to practice these things. And you go and you study up on them and look at tips, and it becomes a strategy. But there's this thing about practicing humanity in the workplace that really comes from a truly human place, which is, yes, connected to feelings and emotion, but also coming from a journey of like true growth in yourself. And that's not easy. It's not meant to be something you can just kind of decide to do and flip a switch and you're there. And I think that is one of the kind of most challenging things for myself and for anyone I work with or talk to really start grasping when it comes to vulnerability, which is kind of where your question started. I mean, you have to understand that like vulnerability is not meant to be easy. It's a sign of courage. It takes courage to actually achieve. And so many people, and I won't generalize, but many people I've worked with say, hey, I need to work, like I've been given feedback that I need more vulnerability, or I've read about vulnerability. I want to have more vulnerability. And this word just used over and over. And so just to achieve that one singular goal, they'll go about, sharing their personal life with people and almost sometimes too much, like sometimes just going off the other end and just being brutally honest about everything. And, that's great. Some of that takes courage and some of those are good steps. When I look at becoming more vulnerable, I look at how do you seek that uncomfortable feeling? And I don't mean just for the sake of being uncomfortable, but there's a reason why some things are harder to share and some things that aren't. If it could be easy for me to share about some of my childhood drama, and if I share it, it doesn't mean I'm being vulnerable, and that's not where vulnerability comes from. Vulnerability literally comes from those places where we really don't want to share it, or we really don't feel like we're comfortable or safe to share it, but we're going to, in order to put ourselves out there, in order for ourselves to show that we are open and we want to connect. And I think that purpose is sometimes lost in that journey. And so I always say, seek that uncomfortability. Like where are things uncomfortable, and go towards it. Like dig a little deeper as to why, and see where the opportunity is in there.
Yeah, I love the seeking to understand the why and going deeper. And for me, as I hear you talking through this, I think about intentionality. As we talk about some things, being brutally honest or sharing certain stories that may appear to be vulnerable, or what are we doing it for? Are we doing it to get people to feel sorry, or to get manipulated, or to buy in, or are we telling these stories because we really want to share, because there's something that, like you said, we want to connect to, or we want to grow from together? So I appreciate your distinction there. And as a group, it seemed like your group went through those raw ups and downs. As a culture, you guys were very transformative together, sharing. I'm sure there were moments of emotions that were pretty deep and really put you into action mode. I think that's something that's important for us to recognize too. There's times for us to come out stronger and better, we have to go through some troubling times, some darkness. It doesn't mean we can't break through, or we can't seek the joy, or you can't seek to get better, because I think the goal is to get better from all those things. I believe you also believe in the growth mindset, where we try to learn around every corner, the good and bad moments of our life, and try to figure out what is the message and try to figure out how we move forward. And I think it ties nicely into the level of thinking around what we share vulnerably and courageously and everything we're talking through. I think it's pretty critical, especially as a leader, because one more thing, as I recall meeting with a group of leaders and had asked them to say, how do you connect with your people? And this group at a different company said, well, we're not allowed to talk to our people. We're not allowed to get to know our people. And I'm thinking, oh my God, they need to meet Jeff and the team about love as a business strategy, right? The connection's lost. How do you get people to bring their full selves in? How do you get people excited about contributing to something bigger, to really connect and grow and learn and have that growth mindset? That's hard if you're not really reinforcing and sharing and really getting into the element of trust for each other.
And growth mindset is top of that list I was mentioning earlier of like buzzwords that gets kind of missed a little bit sometimes. And I think it's so important, because I am literally living my everyday life trying to embrace a growth mindset. It's one of my goals, my personal challenges to myself. And I think the really, really important thing to understand if you're trying to follow along in a growth mindset is that it is not as much about learning as you think. I think people hear a growth mindset, they're like, okay, I just got to be always growing and learning, because it's got the word growth in it. So it just means, hear new ideas and study, go on YouTube, read a book, and you just keep growing. And that's important. But I think Alvin Toffler had a quote. He said that the illiterate of the 21st century won't be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And really, if I were to rewrite that quote, I would just simplify it to just a growth mindset is unlearning, period. That's the block that really gets in the way of a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. When you only focus on what can I continue to grow and gain and learn, that's great. That's a learning mindset. But a growth mindset needs to have hey, I've been doing this for 20 years one way and it's always worked, but let me challenge my thinking here. Let me allow this new college graduate with some crazy idea. Let me welcome that idea in. Let me take it seriously. Let me really think about, can this be done completely differently? Could I be wrong? Is there a chance that I'm wrong here? And that's so hard for people to do. It's so hard for people who have proven track records and just like this, especially the older we get and the more in leadership positions that we get, well, it almost feels like we're not allowed to be wrong as leaders, because, people depend on us to be right. That's where a growth mindset's really practiced, where you really are willing to be wrong. Like you look for it. You're like, man, I want to be wrong here. I feel like I would love to be schooled in this matter, even though I think I know the answer. And so being able to unlearn these things is that missing gap some people have when they say they want a growth mindset. But to practice it, you really have to challenge the very things that you currently don't even think about. You don't even think about second guessing yourself on some of these things. That's where you should start.
Yeah, I think that's great perspective. Thinking about how we innovate and discover new things. It truly is exploring what we know and challenging what we know to make it better, or to, like you said, to replace it. And it's really, when you think about rewiring habits or changing the way we're presenting ourselves, or even being vulnerable enough to say, hey, you know what, I got that wrong. I've recognized that when I've done that as a leader, I've gotten the most credibility back, and I didn't expect it. Like you said, we're supposed to have the answers, or not allowed to say I don't know, or not be inclusive in that way. And I feel like the more I do that, the more trust I'm building, the more I'm learning and growing, because it's one of the elements in my own book. I talk about open-minded curiosity, and just the ability to crave your willingness to actually adapt new things and build on that, or to change your way of thinking. That, to me, that's the ability to do those things together. So I appreciate very much what you're saying. I applaud that very much, because you're right. The growth mindset tends to be learn, grow. That's a great distinction. Now, how about for you, Jeff? Are there moments that you recognize in your life that either was a life lesson, good or bad, or was something you had to unlearn that you're willing to share? It's, again, not just to be vulnerable, yet to do it in the way you defined it, something that you feel like has been showing up for you now that you've grown from. Because part of what we're trying to share with our audience is, hey, we all have to overcome certain challenges, life lessons, or certain memories, yet hopefully we're taking those learnings as a way to overcome, to relearn, unlearn, as you said, and really position ourselves to do better or do differently in the future. So I'm just curious if there's anything that shows up for you that reminds you of what you're doing today or what you learned over time that's really helping you deliver what you're most passionate about.
Yeah, actually, one of the reasons I am so passionate about growth mindsets and just that type of topic is my own kind of journey in it. It's centered around my father. I looked up to him a lot growing up, and he and my mom, he was having extramarital affairs when I was in my early 20s. And so I was away from home, and this news kind of broke, and it really made me look at the world differently after that point. Being someone that I considered ever faithful, loyal, strong, the ideal kind of like role model for me, having that moment really kind of shattered a lot of realities for me. And I was still young enough to kind of be molded by that quickly, even though at the time I dealt with it by saying, we're all adults, I'm glad that this didn't happen when I was younger, and this is fine. Like, this is for the best. Everything's okay. But really, it kind of deep-seated a lot of just to simplify it, a lot of fixed mindsets in me about the world. I saw the world differently. I saw the world as much more cold and calculated. And it showed up in my kind of leadership style and my kind of the way I showed up in the workplace, for sure. For much of my early career, it was, let's get the work done. I don't really want to get to know you. I don't really want to know what is going on. It doesn't have anything to do with what we get paid to do. That was very much my mindset going in. I was very strong-willed in that. I was kind of risk adverse. I didn't want to have any tough conversations. I don't want to get into any of those altercations. I just want to get the work done, keep to myself, and not deal with a lot of that. And that, weirdly enough and interestingly enough, that a lot of that stemmed from kind of just how I generally viewed the world and people in general. I looked at people as unchangeable. I viewed my dad, like my dad's action in that moment had kind of invalidated everything he was before that, as a kid. All the good things he did as a father, all the good memories I had of him were just wiped clean because he was just defined by this moment now. And I viewed the world that way. If you worked with me and you made a mistake, I was like, you're dead to me. Like I can't trust you next time because, that's just who you are. You're either smart or you're dumb, right? We're just born that way. That's just kind of how I started approaching the world. It wasn't in a very conscious way. This is just my leadership style. And if people had a problem with it, I would just say, that's just who I am. Sorry, you got to deal with it. I mean, it's your problem. Like, I am who I am. I'm getting results. If you don't like it, step aside. And so my moment came 6 years ago, actually almost 7 years ago, in a week or two of this recording. My son was born, my firstborn child, my son, Cody, and he was born. And at this point, I really wasn't having much of a relationship with my dad anymore. They'd been divorced, and he'd been, I just didn't want to deal with that. But I felt it proper to invite him to his grandson's, first few moments in this world, as being blood related. It's almost an obligation I felt to invite him. But it's also my first time seeing my dad in a very long time. And he was in the hospital with just holding his grandson. And it was a light up moment, if you will, where I saw my father as something completely different, right? I saw him as a human in that moment, just in that brief moment. I saw him as a grandfather, a father, a person with feelings. And really, I imagine my son, the one that had just entered this world, growing up to be my age and feeling some kind of way about me, feeling the way I feel about my dad, right? And I can't imagine what I would do wrong. But even if I did that, I would hope my son could forgive me, or, not hate me, or whatever it is, whatever mistakes I make. And it broke my heart to kind of have that sudden, this flood of kind of emotion in that hospital room. And
Wow.
And it was a moment that sticks with me for a very long time, because it started a journey, not only of my relationship with my dad, but also how I even view the world. I mean, beyond it helped me really look at, okay, like, my dad is not just a summation of his mistake and just the mistakes he's made. He's human. He's fallible, and he's not always perfect. And so neither are you, neither am I, neither is anybody. And so I started giving myself more grace. I started giving other people more grace. And I started really looking at my mindset as, I'm a work in progress. So let's treat life that way. And it really set me down a different path of, all the things that I talk about today are stemming from that place, because it's just a more loving way to look at the world. And my life has been so much better for it. The way I parent, the way I'm a husband, the way I work, the way I'm a friend, are all, affected by that mindset. And I am a very different person now, which anybody can say after becoming a parent. But for me, it was a little more than that too. It's like I gained a son and a father back in the same day. And I think that is why I push for people to really fight for their growth mindsets so passionately, because it can really change everything, all in a moment.
Oh, wow. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful story. And I appreciate you sharing. It's vulnerable, and it's, I think there's a lot of people that could probably relate, just the relationships with their parents and their frustrations, or they've given up, and, the grace that you've given your dad and yourself is powerful. And I'm not sure if you're fully forgiving him yet. I often will refer to forgiveness as something that's powerful too, just in general, because it relieves some of the pain we have. Doesn't mean it goes away. It doesn't mean there's not imperfection still in any kind of relationship or our memories. Yet it gives us the power to move forward and to grow, as your story outlines beautifully, and how you're sharing with that and showing your son that it's gonna change over time. The beauty and the love that we have for each other, and the humanity of how we treat each other, and how you're bringing humanity back in the workplace. And I think all that stems back to some of this thinking and some of the transformation you've had in your business, in your career as well. I think it stems back, and I appreciate you sharing. I think it's so powerful for the listeners to hear what can happen when we put ourselves out there, and just you gave humanity a chance, in my mind, and it gave you much love back.
Yeah. And, you hit the nail on the head. It is, for me, a lesson around growth mindset, but there's this concept of forgiveness that is just not talked about enough, in my opinion, in the context of the workplace, which, from what I've seen, most of our unforgiveness is with people we work with. I mean, if you talk to any of your friends, you're out having a beer, they're just complaining about work. And it's not usually the work, it's the boss or the coworker. And that's, like, if you really think about it, I think a lot of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we can trace back to business decisions that are impacted by unforgiveness, large or small. Even just, man, that person, just I don't like working with that person. We don't bother to kind of nail down why or what happened. Maybe it's not even their fault. Maybe they just remind you of somebody else you have unforgiveness for. But regardless, the feeling of unforgiveness, being kind of holding on to something that's unsaid, drives our bottom line more than we realize or are allowed to accept in the business. We prevent people from taking on projects they probably deserve, or we don't give people enough chances, or we don't give the raises and recognition, all from this place of, like, very hidden. I'm not trying to claim that we're evil people out here, like, with, like, vindictive vendettas, but the reality is, like, without an actual focus on it, we have these subconscious, unconscious kind of decision making and biases that just come out from our unforgiveness, and we don't talk about it. Like the 6 pillars we talk about in the book, this is the one that I love to harp on, because you've probably heard all the other ones before: inclusion, empathy, vulnerability, trust, empowerment. You're going to hear those words in the workplace all the time nowadays. But why aren't we talking about forgiveness? Because without that one, I mean, none of the other ones can move forward. We can't talk about trust if there's no forgiveness, right? I'm not going to be vulnerable or have empathy for you if I cannot forgive you. And that's it's such an important, I think it takes intentionality. It's hard. It's so hard. And I always tell people, you got to choose your hard. You got to choose your hard, because, saving money is hard. Being broke is hard too. So you got to pick one. And when it comes to forgiveness, putting yourself out there, seeking forgiveness, giving forgiveness, having tough forgiveness conversations is hard. But working with that looming in the underneath is also hard. And I would argue harder. So I can't stress forgiveness enough.
Yeah, you talk about trust in your story, just how that was broken, and that helped to mend itself through really the olive branch you threw out there, and the ability to have compassion and forgiveness, and you did it with grace. And it's a great message, because you're right. In the workplace, when someone wrongs you or you lose that trust, someone's not following through or gives you some feedback you didn't like, if we're not looking at what the purpose is, understanding what that connection is, maybe to get better, or if we think someone wronged us, that's all we're looking for. We're looking for a pattern. Hey, they're going to do it again. Oh, they said it again. And then that's all we're looking for. We're not looking for the good. We're not looking for where they're coming from. We're not looking for the attention. We're not looking for the greater purpose or picture. Limits our abilities.
Humans are wired in this very inconvenient way, right? When we lack information, we fill in the blanks, and we're very, very good at it. We're very, very good at it. It's like how we protect ourselves. It's how we get smarter and evolve and deal with the dangers of the world. But then we create these work environments where talking beyond the task at hand has become unnecessary or taboo or unneeded. No time for it. And so what do? All we have is the data we have. We have so-and-so did this. They were late on doing this, or they said this in a meeting. That's it. Yeah. Everything else is a blank to fill in. So we start saying, man, Darrin hates me. Man, Darrin's out to get me. I can't believe he made that decision that directly impacts me without talking to me about it first. And on your end, Darrin, you're just like, I'm just trying to get the work done too. I'm making the best decision I can with the stuff I have in front of me right now. You may not even thought about how it impacts someone else. And we don't have the conversation that would just be normal and human to be like, hey, Darrin, why did you do that? It kind of pissed me off. And you're like, whoa, not what I intended to do. We can make that. We don't have those conversations because it's just like, well, the boss said this, he said that, and we're going to move on. And we all smile and we all nod and we all go to the next meeting, and we're all very, very cordial. Yeah. And we slowly hate each other. We slowly just start, we cannot stand each other. I just don't even want to be in a meeting with you because of all these decisions you've made that are just out to get me. And it's crazy, man. Like, I mean, that's the world that so many of us currently just actively live in every day. Like, so much frustration. And I'm frustrated looking at it because I'm like, if we just had this culture of this expectation to just talk about these things, why not? Why shouldn't we be saying, you hurt my feelings and you upset me with that thing you did? Like, that's the only way we fill in these blanks with the facts. That's the only way we stop drawing our own conclusions.
I agree. Having that level of openness and visibility about what's really going on is critical. I think there's got to be a level of common purpose or common level of appreciation and support for each other, genuine care and interest, those type of things, for that to happen. Because I kind of laughed when you're saying head nods. I always kind of talk about that as a kind of a passive aggressive behavior. Everybody says, yeah, they walk away and they don't want to do anything, or they don't want to do it, or they complain, rather than saying, wait, let's talk about what this really means. Why are we doing this? Or why did that come across that way to me? Or let me understand more about where you're coming from. So I think it's everybody's responsibility, though, to ask the questions through inquiry. Doesn't mean we have to yell at each other. or be mean to each other. I think we could do this in a compassionate way. To me, that's like you said earlier, how we're treating each other with love. It's still treating each other with an understanding to say, hey, I want to learn more about that. I'm not sure I agree. So you're not overstating your point. Yeah, you're interested, you're curious to learn more. Because I think anybody that talks tentatively that way, I think would be willing to share more as a leader, or willing to learn more as an employee. At least I would. That's what my belief is. And I know you talk a lot about culture, and whose responsibility is culture anyway, would you say, Jeff?
Yours.
Exactly.
I think there's this idea that's grown that I really hate around how we even use culture, like as a noun. The way we say, oh, Google's culture, Uber's culture, your company's culture, my company's culture. The culture does not belong to a company. And it is not something that you can just go and consume. And it feels that way so often. It's like, oh man, that company's got a great culture. I'm gonna go join that company so I can have that culture. And I'm like, that's does not make any sense, because culture is nothing more than how we treat each other. That's it. It's just how we behave around each other. And by that very definition, we are responsible for culture, and we affect culture whether we mean to or not. And so culture is a collaboration. It's an action. It's a verb that we come together to build every day, every single day, every single interaction builds or breaks down culture. And so you have this culture vulture mindset where I can just come and, consume this great quote culture or whatever it is. And most of the time that's actually just perks and benefits you're consuming. It's not even really the actual culture. And there's this passiveness associated with culture that I think is part of the movement I'm trying to push for, is that whether you like it or not, you're contributing culture. So let's make that intentional.
Yeah.
And it starts with getting uncomfortable again. It starts with, we have so much comfort in our workplace that those smiles we give each other, it's comfortable, it's harmonious, right? Someone says something, in my example earlier, Darrin, you make a decision that I don't like. It's easy and comfortable to just say, all right, great, sounds good, a great meeting, we'll see you guys next week, see you Monday. Like, great, everybody leaves feeling great, right? No, not me, and maybe not other people, probably nobody, but we all leave with that smile and that comfort. And I say, but that's not honest. And so I encourage people to always choose honesty over harmony. Take the route of honesty, because you have less to lose than you think. It sounds very hard, because it is, but once you get it out there, you'll see what happens when honesty is spoken out into the world. People suddenly see you differently, suddenly see each other differently, and in the room differently. And it's okay to have hey, Darrin, I just want to know why you did that, because it doesn't make sense to me. And I want to know, like, coming from the right place, not just, hey, Darrin, that was a jerk move, I don't like you. Like, not that kind of, I'm talking about real curiosity to understand one another. And it changes everything. It changes the dynamic. It helps us understand our place better. And now you're talking about culture that is being practiced together, right? And building together.
I agree. I would challenge a little bit about, and I think what you said clarified it for me. When you said taking honesty over harmony, I think the honesty needs to be there. I think there can be harmony too, when it's understood and people are working towards common goals, and they're working towards actually growing together and understanding why, without blaming, without saying it's not their responsibility. Because I agree with you about the culture piece too, around culture doesn't happen to us. Culture is what we create, what we contribute. Everything you said, I love that. And I also believe the work you're doing with Love as a Business Strategy in your book and your podcast is helping people do those things where we could actually have honest discussions, crucial conversations, create harmony through love. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about your book, how that's structured and how that is being perceived and received. I love what you have on the website. You have different workbooks and elements that people can continue to grow off of that. Then also, secondly, I'd love to hear how this has turned into your passion on the podcast and how you're connecting with people and what you're learning through that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love to share it all. I'll try not to inundate everybody, but Love as a Business Strategy. The book's been out about 2 years now. It's a best-selling book on several different publications, Amazon, Wall Street Journal, etc. But you can pick that up anywhere. But it goes through our story. Kind of, I highlighted a little bit of Muhammad's piece at the front of this hour, but it follows it in detail. And it's not. We wrote it in a way as to not be a business book. You'll find it in the business section, but it's written as a story. All through and through, it is our story of what we learned, usually the hard way, kind of a cautionary tale in a way, but it covers our journey and it covers the 6 pillars that we've come up with that we now revolve everything around: inclusion, empathy, vulnerability, trust, empowerment, and forgiveness. And then it talks about how we practice it and how we fail at practicing it, but how you can also potentially leverage those things. So that's what Love as a Business Strategy is, the book. And then shortly, with the kind of hand in hand with the book, we've been doing the podcast Love as a Business Strategy, which I host. And it does a lot of what we're doing here. We're really just, it's such an easy topic to talk about, to be honest, because, you know, there's a little bit of love everywhere, and there's places that there's always somewhere that could use more of it. And the aim of the podcast is just to bring on humans that have an experience, whether it's expertise and a PhD in something, or leadership experience in businesses that have or don't have what they're looking for, and everything in between. And just looking to share those experiences and stories and dialogue to help expand. So very, very similar purpose and mission, but something I'm very passionate about, which is that conversation. And in those, I'll be doing a lot less talking. So if you tune into those and you're tired of my voice, don't worry. The guest gets to talk a lot more on on my show.
No, I appreciate everything you're sharing too. It's wonderful. I think, you know, what you're doing, you're paying what you've learned forward out to the world. You know, you're a gift. Your team's a gift. Muhammad and team are a gift with, you know, Love as a Business Strategy and everything you're doing as a proud facilitator. I know it's something you're doing there as well. I'm sure you're helping to connect different leaders with how they can actually transform their cultures and themselves through reflection and the actions they can take. One of the things I'm curious, with everything you're doing, what do you perceive for you as like a superpower for you? And how does that show up?
Oh my goodness. Wow. I do believe that everybody has a superpower. I love to find those around me. And I think that's a great question, because I don't enough ask myself that question. I'm always looking for other people's. But I think if I had to name one, I think it's in the passion I have to impact a change in mindset in people. It's a double-edged sword. I think I can be very overbearing, like with friends and family, especially. But if you have a conversation with me, I'm always going to look for a way to change your mind. And not everybody loves that, but if I had to pick a superpower, that'd be it, because I'm going to challenge you. Like if you're in front of me complaining about somebody else, I'm going to be talking about you, and you're going to hate that. You're going to be saying, no, but they did this and they did that. And I'm like, yeah. And how did that affect you? And why did you react that way? And what can we do about it? What kind of conversation could you be having? Why are you telling me? Why are you not talking to them? Like I'm looking to push people that way at all times. Yeah. And so it's kind of my superpower, but it's hard. It's the jury's still out on whether I'm a superhero or a supervillain. So.
That's funny. I mean, it seems like you're expanding mindsets, right? So I feel like folks might need different perspectives. You're adding folks ideas to think about. I don't think you're telling people. I think you're helping people to learn to get to a place where they might see a full picture. Maybe it won't be as hard on them. So I see yourself as a hero. You know, I see yourself as a super connector. You know, I think it's one of your gifts. I'm not sure yet about all the games you have behind you and your screen, how that connects in yet. Maybe that's for a future episode. Yeah, it's it's something that you've shared with me in the past as far as what those are, because I wasn't sure. But for our guests, those are what you described, Jeff.
They're board games. I mean, I'm sitting in my office in my kind of hiding from my kids. So this is my board game shelf. I collect board games. I have like 250 or so, just nice. Various different board games. And I mean, I guess it says a little bit about myself. I'm a little strategic. I like to gamify things. I like to make sure that all the pieces fall into place whenever things are in play. But just it's also just a hobby. So and a background for Zoom calls.
That's fun. Is there anything else, Jeff, you'd want to share with the audience as far as how they should start to think about their first steps on the journey to help change their culture, how to help bring their authentic selves to work every day?
Yes. We are a business. So of course we sell this stuff and we talk this stuff, but it is more than that to all of us. It is a true mission. So I'm happy to connect with people, LinkedIn, loveasabusinessstrategy.com, all the different avenues to just reach out and connect if you have questions, whatever. This is not a kind of a business thing for us when it comes to just connecting with humans, hearing stories, and just helping. I'd love to help if you just want to chat. So I offer that to your listeners. And for those on the business end of things, that very Seneca Leaders program that we started this entire journey with, we still do that and we still offer that. So if you're looking to have that for yourself, for your team, for your company, whatever, you can also reach out. Happy to connect with these listeners, offer discounts around those as well, but just talk about all that stuff. I'm always happy to work in this space with anybody. So I really open up that door for really anybody to come and meet me there.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. We'll definitely put the links here on the show for folks to reach out to you and to join in on that. I'm going to sign up. That sounds amazing.
I'll definitely give you a discount.
All right.
You're in.
Hey, Jeff, I admire everything you're doing. I have a love for the work and the vulnerability and the passion you're bringing. And, love for you and the team, love as a business strategy. And it's really a gift that you're bringing out to the world and to all the leaders in our audience here. I'm honored to get to know you, and I'm grateful for your time today. Thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Darrin.
Thank you. Take care. I just love hearing Jeff's stories and his views. They're filled with such purpose and intentionality. He's just helping us expand our minds and bringing us new perspectives to consider. A few takeaways from today's call for us to reflect on and experiment with are the following. First thing, see challenges us not to think culture gets consumed and is one we contribute to. So what action can you take today to start making your workplace a little better, perhaps more joyful, inclusive, or even loving? Start today. Don't wait. It'll be worth it. Jeff also profoundly encourages us to unlearn or be wrong about something and get better from admitting and growing from that. So I challenge you, and I'm going to practice this one myself later today or tomorrow, to be present with someone in a conversation or a dialogue and to listen closely, to unlearn something I had a view on or an opinion about, and see if I was wrong or see how I can expand that view or perspective to make it better. Because I guarantee we'll grow. And I love that perspective and challenge that Jeff gave us on this one. Lastly, Jeff shared his light up moment about his dad. When Jeff had a newborn son and he invited his dad back into his life to hold his newborns in his hands. And I love how he gave grace, which rewarded him back with this light up moment where it turned his life right side up. So I invite you to take 5 minutes today to think about a light up moment in your life that really changed your perspective and put you into action or changed your mindset to look at something with a greater meaning and purpose. Nothing comes to mind. I really invite you and challenge you and dare you to be ready for it, because it will change the rest of your life. It'll light you up, literally. Thank you for tuning in and listening. And remember, take small steps each day to ignite your happy, authentic self and live your possible.
That's all for today's episode. If you liked the show, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Live Your Possible dares to unlock your fullest potential and become an avenue for others to do the same. Join the community by visiting ignitehappy.com. It's time to discover endless possibilities with equal opportunity for all. See you again next week for more insights on how you can live your possible.